Everybody. I think I was supposed to start like 55 seconds ago, so I should probably just go ahead and go. How's everybody doing? Great, good, awesome. Good to go. Just didn't want to give you guys any sort of teaser of anything. So I know it's like the end of the day, so has it been a good day? Good day, bad day? Yeah, good? Mostly good? Okay, cool. Anything really extraordinary? Anybody see anything that was like really awesome? Is anybody actually willing to yell something like that out?
We were expecting this talk.
Oh, okay. Hey, no pressure or anything. Cool. Oh, well, I've already heard from one guy who was kind enough to inform me that there was only one talk he wanted to see today, but he was lured by someone else into coming and seeing mine, so it better be good. So I appreciate that. Cool, so I'm going to go ahead and dive in. I'm going to keep this moving. I have a decent amount of stuff that I'm going to get through, but I don't want to keep you guys late, certainly. I'm sure people have places to go and things to see. And probably you're all just fried. I can't imagine it's like a whole day of like just getting inundated with people going, yeah, pretty fried. Well, I'm going to talk to you about a very broad subject. And, you know, since we're all friends here, right, I will go ahead and disclose. I'm going to talk to you about a very broad subject that, frankly, I didn't actually even choose. But it is a topic that I'm very fond of. This is one of those instances when it was like last week someone was like, hey, did you know you're speaking at HTML5DevConf? And I was like, nope. But this is actually something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is just mobile design. It's a very, very broad subject, and I attack this from a very particular point of view that I will reveal as we talk. But the title of my talk, evidently, is Mobile Design for Reals this time. I take absolutely no credit for the title of that talk, and I apologize. But I am going to talk to you about mobile design, and at least as I see it, or at least as we see it at ZURB, which is where I'm from, the right way to do it. The right way to do it for the web. I'm not going to be talking about native stuff. If native is your thing, then that's awesome and more power to you. I like native apps too. I still play a lot of games and things like that. But the web is where my heart is, and that's where I'm going to be talking. So hi, I'm Jonathan Smiley. I don't know the context of that picture anymore, but I was fond of that chicken. You're welcome to follow me on Twitter. I'm @Smiley. I work for a company called ZURB. ZURB is a product design company down in Campbell, down in the South Bay, the uncool end of the bay. At least that's what I'm told. So every time I come up here, I don't feel hip enough. I got to throw on the jacket, and I just don't think I'm doing it right. And anyways, but we're a product design company down in the South Bay. We've been doing it for 16 years, so we've been around for a little while. We've worked with a lot of really big companies. We've worked with Facebook and eBay and Intuit and Intel and a few others, doing some pretty cool stuff. And we've been doing this long enough that we've gotten to see how the web has changed. Especially in the last few years in a really, really big way. And this is something that I'm just really crazy about, and I love the way the web is changing, actually, because it's a very different animal than it was 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and the pace is really accelerating. It's kind of amazing. And primarily, the web has changed in such a dramatic way because of things like this. Because of mobile devices, really powerful mobile devices. I'm not a complete Apple fanboy. I will recognize that there are other kinds of mobile devices. But because of mobile devices, the web has changed just in a huge, huge way. I think it's just absolutely fascinating and like borders on science fiction that, you know, a device this size that I can keep in my pocket is not only considerably more powerful than the first computer I ever bought with like my money, which was not all that long ago. It's also considerably more powerful than all of the computers that NASA used to put men on the moon. I think that's pretty amazing. I saw a thing written once that said, NASA put men on the moon, we use it to fling birds into pigs. I thought that was pretty clever. But I think it borders on science fiction just how cool these devices actually are and what they can do with the web. It makes me really, really excited. So mobile devices like the iPhone, like Samsung's devices, like the entire spectrum of devices. I saw a chart yesterday which was a visualization of the fragmentation of the Android marketplace, and it looked like it just looked like static. There were so many of them. It was incredible. Like, there's so many of these things. Mobile devices are, you caught that, huh? Mobile devices are kind of a big deal. Just to show you how much of a big deal they are, for every human born, we manufacture 10 mobile devices. So every time we make a human, we make 10 mobile devices. And you could argue that it takes longer to make a human, but we're still making them at like breakneck speed. We're going to double how many there are within the next 5 to 8 years. So as many as there are now, there will be twice as many within it's probably closer to 5 years than it is to 8. It's a lot of mobile devices. And if you want to know just how many, there are already more mobile devices than there are humans on this planet. So it's a lot. There are a lot of mobile devices. Obviously, there's places where there are more and where there are less, but by and large, there are more mobile devices than human beings. It was last year that mobile use, at least mobile web use, outpaced mobile desktop web use. So mobile users are, mobile is the name of the game. Mobile is the thing. Mobile is it. These things are not going away. These devices are not going to go away. They're only going to get more fragmented and more complicated and more powerful. And that's pretty awesome because they're really cool. Like, they're really cool devices. I use this as an example of just where mobile devices have managed to get to because I think this is incredible. Have any of you ever used One King's Lane? Is that a thing? Anybody's used? A few hands? Usually just a couple of hands. It's kind of like overpriced vintagey stuff. Some of it's actually cheap. That's not entirely fair. But their CEO, his name's Doug Mack. He's kind of a crazy person. He came and spoke at ZURB once. Smart guy, kind of neurotic. What he does in the evenings is he sits on his iPad or on his phone or whatever, and he just watches what people buy. He just kind of watches them. And he was doing that one night. I know it sounds creepy. He was doing that one night, and he noticed that someone bought a $17,000 Hermes wallet. Did you know that was a thing? Wallets that cost that much? I didn't know that. They bought a $17,000 Hermes wallet on their phone. They bought it through their phone. I can't remember any time short of real estate when I've spent that kind of money, period, let alone through my phone. I don't know that I would be comfortable doing that. I don't know a lot of people that would be comfortable doing that. But people are becoming increasingly comfortable using their mobile devices to do everything. This I thought was hilarious. You guys familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? You guys ever seen this? It's like you need shelter and safety and love and self-esteem and self-actualization. I saw a modification to this that I thought was appropriate, which was first you need Wi-Fi, then you need all the rest of these things. And I think that's about right. I found myself in Sweden a couple of months ago, and I was reminded that in the US and worldwide, you cannot get functioning Wi-Fi at a hotel. Full stop. And I felt completely lost. I felt like I didn't have shelter. I felt like I didn't have anything. So mobile devices are hugely important, and everybody recognizes this, and we all have them. I bet everyone in this room has at least one, if not more, devices on their person at this time. I would be shocked if anyone didn't. Is anyone actually not carrying a device of any kind? That would have blown me away. Okay. That has not happened in all the times I've asked that question. So. And at ZURB, we love mobile design. We love mobile design. We got really big into mobile about 3-4 years ago. Mobile web, I should say. We're very, very fond of it. You know, we feel really, really good about it. I actually have to thank Luke for that picture. I think it's hilarious. But we love this mobile stuff. And we love mobile-first design. Mobile-first design is I hate to use the word paradigm because I feel like that's using some sort of like buzzwordy, stupid thing, but it is a paradigm, I guess, of a way to actually do mobile design, and we're very big fans of it. Has anybody heard mobile first? Have you guys heard that? Mobile first? I usually get a bunch of hands for that. It was popularized in large part by Luke Wroblewski, Luke W., who's actually an advisor for ZURB. Actually, he took that picture. Which there's others like it, and they're all equally preposterous. But mobile-first design is a really big thing. And the first thing I would actually say about mobile-first design is that mobile-first design means that you don't use mobile devices like this. When you think about mobile design, when you think about how you're going to design for mobile, the first thing you think about is not the device. Don't think about the device first. The device is obviously important, but think about the fact that nobody uses devices like this. You don't sit at your desk and hold your phone in front of you like this and just do stuff. That isn't how people operate. You use your phone in places like this, and you use your mobile devices in places like this, and you use your mobile devices in places like this. There is no siloed lab-style setting in which it is the way you're going to use an actual mobile device, which is funny because that's typically how mobile design and mobile building is actually done. You do it at a desk. You do it at your desk. When you do testing, I've seen any number of mobile testing labs which are step into our mobile testing lab, sit in this chair, hold the phone like this, and sit at a table and use this thing. And that is just not how it's actually done. Mobile design is an ecosystem. Mobile design is recognizing that there is a whole world of ways in which you're going to actually use devices, and it's very important that you recognize and actually build for that. It's important to design for what people do. It's important for design for where people are. Basically, it's important to design for actual human people, not people who sit at a desk and do design, which is what I do. I sit at a desk and I do design. But you have to put yourself in a mindset of, this isn't how someone's going to actually be using this. I saw the example that I always use. I had a client who they had already done a bunch of design work for this app, and it was an app to, if you ever use like TripIt or anything like that, it was an app where it like kind of like tracks your travel and stuff, and it was like, oh, we've designed this app to help it be really easy to travel. And they were talking about, yeah, you can punch in all your travel plans, and when you want to know, like, for example, what gate you have to go to, all you do is you open the app and you pick the trip that you're on, and you pick the leg of the trip that you're on, and then you pick the airport that you're in, and then it'll show you which gate it is, and then you tap on this thing to see a map. And I was like, if I'm stumbling out of an airplane after like a 9-hour flight, I don't want to go through like 4 or 5 levels of my stuff. I want you to just look and know where I am, because the device already knows where I am. Just show me where I'm supposed to go. Tell me where my next gate is. Other people have figured this out. They weren't thinking of the fact that you don't use it while you're sitting at a desk. You use it while you're stumbling around with all these people who smell bad, and you just had to sit next to them for 8 hours, and you hate them all, and you hate where you are, and it's just miserable. So design for actual human people. That's the first thing I say about doing mobile design is, don't think of it as the way you would do it sitting at your desk. Think of it the way people are actually going to use it. So, having gotten that out of the way, let's talk about mobile first design in 5 easy-ish steps. And I'm going to show this to you in the way that we do this at ZURB. So we work with anywhere from 10 to 16 clients at a time. Our projects tend to be 6 to 10 weeks. We work with a lot of clients. Some of them are startups, some of them are large companies. But with all of our clients, we do multi-device, responsive, mobile-first design. Full stop. We just don't think there's a better way to do it. And the first thing that we do is sketch. I love sketching. Sketching has always been one of my favorite things to do. And when you sketch to do design, when you sketch to do mobile design, first thing you need to remember is that you have to sketch a lot, like a lot. When we do sketches for clients, and we do them, I'll talk about how we do them, but when we do sketches for clients, sketches are all about quantity, not quality, honestly. A sketch is a way for you to open up an idea. A sketch is a way for you to explore the possibilities of something. A sketch is a way for you to open up your own mind about something. It's a way to understand the problem. When we do mobile design, we start by sketching. Which seems strange because paper is a long ways from a mobile device, but it is actually a really good way to start. We're actually so fixated on really sketching in bulk that sometimes it helps to, I've done this a number of times, it helps to set yourself a goal, like with a reward. So what I did once upon a time was I realized, okay, I needed to get through 100 sketches for one of these clients in 2 hours, which is pretty fast. It's a lot of sketches and not a whole lot of time. It's about 1 every minute and change. And I figured, okay, if I'm going to have to power through all this stuff, I'm going to have to really incentivize myself. So what I did was I went down the street and I bought a donut. It's called a lemon meringue pie donut from this place called Psycho Donuts in Campbell. And I put it on a paper towel in front of myself, and I said, I get to eat this donut if I finish all of these sketches in time. And I ate that donut, and it was good. And I had a sugar high like you wouldn't believe, and I crashed. But when we do sketches at ZURB, we do mobile sketches. We actually have sketch sheet templates that we use that are actually, they already are framed out to be a mobile device or a tablet or things like that. We have sketch sheet templates that actually have a mobile device right next to a desktop so that we can sketch one and then the other, but we do mobile sketching first. So we'll do sketches like this that are very simple, that are very straightforward, that illustrate one concept or one facet of the UI, long before we do anything like this, where we actually look at like the desktop web interface, or where we look at the like more like the tablet or full larger screen kind of interface. And the reason we do this is because constraints are the best. When you're doing mobile design, mobile first design, it forces you to have all kinds of constraints that are hugely helpful. Constraints about how much stuff you can pack onto a screen. I can't even count the number of times that someone's been designing a particular interface or building an experience for somebody, and they've gone, okay, I think I've covered everything that this needs to do, but I've got all this space left over. What can I put here? And that just, it makes me crazy. It's just such a terrible way to do things, and you see it all the time. Like go to almost any website and just look around and see, okay, these are the 2 things that it clearly needed to do, and this is all the leftover space that they had, and that's why there's a weather widget and a stock ticker and a blah, blah, blah. That's what tends to happen. or there's a photo gallery of these other things. It happens all the time. By doing mobile-first sketching, you constrain yourself to, I must accomplish exactly the task that this is designed for and nothing more. And then I can see what else I might be able to do with this. And there are clever ways to work within those constraints to do really interesting stuff, but it is a really useful constraint. I think that the best design, honestly, comes out of designing for very, very tight constraints long before you address what all of these devices can do with all this real estate and all this space. So we always start by sketching when we're doing mobile design. And after sketching, we move to wireframes. We actually have a relatively traditional process, but we do everything from a mobile perspective, which is a little bit different. You guys have probably done wireframes before. Mobile wireframes that can look something like this. These are just, some of the ones that we've done. But this is, again, it's an interesting way to address a lot of the constraints around a particular interface. It's an interesting way to take sketches, which are very, very lo-fi, and turn them into something tangible. And the reason that we really do this, because I have run into any number of people, and to some extent I think wireframing is almost falling out of style a little bit, which I think is sort of fascinating, because I think there's perfectly legitimate reasons not to do it, but they're typically not the reasons that I hear when people talk about how wireframing is dead. I've heard any number of people say, no, I don't want to do wireframes, I have sketches, I just want to go build it. I want to go to a prototype right now. I want to go code something. I want to go into Photoshop. I want to go do whatever the next step of the phase is. They feel like they're wasting time, I think, with wireframes, something like that. The reason I would say that wireframing is really not dead, and the reason that we still do it at ZURB, and I still do it a lot, is frankly just because details really do matter. If you go straight from sketches to code, for example, and I've seen this a lot, and I won't usually knock 37 signals. They're not 37 signals anymore. Basecamp. I won't usually knock them much because I actually really like those guys and they're very smart, but they do have a tendency to go straight from sketches to code, and I think that shows sometimes. I think it's very easy to get tripped up in how quickly you're moving and omit a lot of details. And I think wireframing is a really useful way to make sure that you do address the details before you have to address anything like how does this get implemented, or how am I going to build this, or what's the right stack. Or what should the visuals be, or what's the brand board, what's the mood board. I think it's important to address the details of an actual UI before you get into any kind of visuals, or you end up with something, something horrible, where you've built some sort of app and there's no customer ratings because no one's using it. I think the details are tremendously important, and I think wireframing is a good way to do that. But wireframing is not the be-all, end-all solution to actually figure out your app. It's just one step in a process. We go to Sketch, we go to wireframes, and then we prototype. Wireframes tell you the details. They tell you the details of an individual screen. What they can't tell you is the actual flow. And this is another area where I've seen many, many things get omitted. Many, many things get lost. You will not believe how easy it is to design a complete UI or a complete experience in wireframes and go to build it and find that you are missing all kinds of things, or that the flow from one place to another makes no sense at all. It's really easy to get stuck in the details that you get here and not think about the fact that you have to go from place to place to place. I heard a very, I will go ahead and say this, I heard a very wise thing once, and it was actually from my boss, and I don't say it in front of him because I don't want him to think that he says wise things to me. But I heard this from him once, and I thought that it was very smart, which is that he told me once, the experience of a site is not the page you're on. The experience of a site is the page you came from and the page you're going to. The page that you're on is your way station. What you actually think of as an experience of using something is how you moved. It's how you moved through it. It's the experience of where you came from and where you're going. I thought that was actually very clever. Again, I will never say that to his face. And if any of you say that I said it, I will say that you're lying. But I thought that was pretty cool. So prototyping is a really good way to make sure that you understand the flow of what it is you're building. It's a really good way to understand how you get from place to place. I will very briefly shift into shameless pimping mode, which is that we have a tool called Solidify, which allows you to do this. We actually do use this fairly frequently because we take our static wireframes, or we even sometimes we'll take our sketches and just organize them into prototypes that you can click through. You just create hotspots. There are lots of tools for doing this. Solidify is the one that we make at ZURB. There are other ones like InVision, like Marvel. You can actually use Keynote to do this, and I've used that in the past. Keynote is actually a pretty powerful prototyping tool if you muck around with it a little bit. But I am contractually obligated to tell you that Solidify is the best, and those other ones are crap. They're not actually crap, but your mileage may vary. So there's lots and lots of tools to do this, and I encourage you to get very comfortable and very familiar with at least one or two of them. If you haven't used like a web-based prototyping tool like Solidify, like InVision, like Marvel, or if you haven't ever used Keynote, or hell, if you haven't used PowerPoint or anything like that, you can get a lot done with those that will really illustrate things for you. If you haven't done it in the past, it will really illustrate things for you in a way you might not totally realize until you do it. Because it's very different to click through something and try to get from point A to point B and actually accomplish a task than it is to build all the screens you think you need in order to do that. Once we prototype, we mock things up. We still do mockups. And this is another instance where I've heard any number of people talk about, mockups are dead. You know, I go from sketches to code, or I go from wireframes to code, or I design in the browser, that sort of a thing. Anybody here do design in the browser a lot? A few hands? Okay. I think that can totally work. I don't care for it. I think it's too limiting. I should say we, but I'm the one talking to you. I think that it's too limiting. I think honestly, we still use Photoshop. Yeah, it's expensive and static, but if you're used to doing, pixel kind of mockups, it is frankly still probably the best. I get that it's not for everyone. We still use Photoshop, but we do mobile mockups first. We do not jump straight into doing the desktop view of anything. We do the mobile view of something. We do the small device view of something. We'll do the tablet view of something. Photoshop is, I will be 100% honest here, not the best probably tool for doing exactly that. It is a very, very powerful tool for doing visuals, and we really like it for that. But it is, honestly, it's kind of tedious. It's cumbersome to do a view that's this size, and a view that's this size, and a view that's this size. It takes time. But we think that time is well spent. So we still do that. We have been experimenting with doing a few other things, and I would encourage you to do the same because they're kind of cool. There's an app called Sketch, which is now in version 3. Sketch 3. I will go ahead and reveal my Mac bias here. So if you're typically PC, I apologize. Sketch is not for you. Other ones are. Sketch 2 was a festering pile of crap that crashed all the time, and I wished it was dead every time I used it. Sketch 3 evidently is actually pretty good. But it does do some really nice stuff if you're doing multi-device design. The nicest of which is that when you're in Sketch, you can basically say, make me a new artboard that is the size of an iPhone 5 in portrait, or an Android tablet in landscape, or whatever, and it just does it. It just creates it for you. And actually, if you're doing iOS-sized things, they actually have a little app you can run on your phone, which will mirror directly from the desktop app to your phone. So you can actually see the stuff you're mocking up as you do it, which is invaluable. Do not rely on your ability to do visual mockups for something like this on your desktop being even close to what it's actually going to feel like when you use it. It is impossible to get the scale right unless you literally put your phone on the screen. It is really difficult to get the scale right. I have seen so many mock-ups where someone has gone, yeah, I think this is a beautiful iPhone screen, and I've gone, cool, can you show it to me on the phone? And they pull it up and you can't read anything because the text is like this big. I've seen that so many times. Sketch will do this directly for you, which I think is awesome. If you don't use Sketch and you're still on a Mac and iOS, there's an app called Live View, which is actually pretty cool. Live View, you basically run it on your computer and it just creates a frame the size of whatever device is connected to it, and it mirrors whatever is in that frame onto the phone. So you can overlay that on whatever you're working on and it will show up here, and it is rad, and I encourage you to play around with that. So Sketch is definitely an option that we've been playing around with. There's a couple of crazier things that you can try, and I think you should try them, because while I don't think either of them are good enough to actually replace your workflow, although I would love to hear if it did, I think that they are an interesting step on the way. There's an app from Adobe called Reflow. Adobe, who finally got their heads out of, you could say, the sand or their ass a few years ago and decided they were going to do stuff for the web again. But Reflow is actually a fascinating app, which is, they market it as responsive Photoshop, which I think is a strange way for them to market it. That's actually how they think about it. I sort of think of it as somewhere in between responsive Photoshop and a Dreamweaver that doesn't suck, if that makes any sense. Because Because what it actually lets you do is it lets you do like WYSIWYG layout of a page, and it is actually doing it in code. And that scared me the first time I saw it, because I was like, oh God, it's Dreamweaver again. But no kidding. I've actually seen the code that it's doing, and it is not nearly as dumb as you think. So it's actually pretty cool. But what I think is really neat, and hang on, I have a laser pointer on here. I can point at things. What I think is actually really neat is this little bar across the top here is actually where you can drag to just set breakpoints, set arbitrary breakpoints of whatever you choose. And at each of those breakpoints, you can completely reshuffle the layout, and it will take care of it for you. Like you can move things down the page, you can change the order of stuff, you can change the spacing between things, you can change all kinds of stuff. It actually makes doing really truly responsive design pretty straightforward, because it's still using like a fluid grid, it's still using percentages, but it'll actually handle just arbitrary breakpoints and however many you need. I think that's really neat. Its big limitation so far is that they actually will not let it export code yet, because I think they're not entirely confident in the code that it's generating. But I think they'll get there, and it's actually pretty cool. That's Reflow. There's an app that is almost exactly like it, and I don't have as much experience with, but I think it's very interesting, which is called Macaw. And that one actually is for Windows and Mac. So if you're on Windows, you can actually use this one. But this one does basically the same thing. It's a responsive WYSIWYG sort of visual, sort of code designer. Definitely play around with both of these. If you do web stuff, I say this, so I'm about to talk about code, and I love code, but I say this to people I work with all the time, and they sort of roll their eyes at me. I think the days of writing code by hand for the web are numbered. It will end. It's just not there quite yet. But if you want a taste of how that's going to die, take a look at Macaw and take a look at Reflow. Because it won't be either of those two. I don't think they're far enough along. But something like them will be what kills writing code by hand for the web. And I'm actually pretty excited about that. And that is a perfect segue into talking about code. Which I do love. I love code. I'm a big fan of code. I do design by trade, but I went to school to do computer science. I love algorithms, and I love being a big nerd. Probably can't tell, I'm a big nerd. But I love code. And doing code mobile first, there is all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with this right now. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about for the rest of this, is all the cool stuff you can do when you're actually building things mobile first and building things responsively. So mobile first. Everybody's heard of mobile first. You probably all know what mobile first really kind of is. Philosophically, this is how I think of mobile first. It is one code to rule them all. It is, you write code that works at the low end of things, and you write that code so that it works for the higher end of things, and it is one set of code that works everywhere. That is the dream of mobile first. That is the dream of responsive. It's not always the case, but it's the way I try to think of it, and it's the way I kind of keep it in my head. There's mobile first, like the techie side. There's mobile first, the canonical specific Ethan Marcotte definition, which is there's a flexible fluid grid that you're probably all reasonably familiar with. There are media styles. The original text said images that flex and scale. I would say that that's just media that flexes and scales, so media that can kind of do this. And media queries that adapt the page based on the physical characteristics of the device. Those are the three canonical technical tenets of responsive design. If you go back and read Ethan's article from almost 3 years ago now, actually I think it's just over 3 years ago now on A List Apart, that's what he outlines. Still holds largely true, I would say. But the landscape is changing quite a bit because now there's mobile first, the practical side, and this is where my bias will really shine through because at ZURB we created something a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, called Foundation, which I'm very, very fond of. It is a framework for building responsive sites. It's an open source framework for building responsive sites. If you've never heard of Foundation, get out. Just kidding. Gonna see if anybody actually left. No, if you haven't actually heard of Foundation, I forgive you. If you haven't heard of Foundation, I'd be reasonably certain you've heard of one of our competitors, which is Bootstrap. The very brief inside baseball thing I'll give you on Foundation and Bootstrap is that both of them were actually developed by either current or previous ZURB designers. Mark Otto, who does Bootstrap, used to work with me at ZURB. And we worked together on the precursor to Foundation and Bootstrap. So if you actually go back and look at the first public versions of both of those, they are almost exactly the same because we both worked on them. Despite Bootstrap being one of our biggest competitors, and I do want to beat Bootstrap to death with Foundation, Mark's actually a really cool guy, and if you ever have the chance to meet him or talk to him, he works at GitHub now, you should absolutely take advantage of that. I love Mark. But Foundation and Bootstrap are both fairly large frameworks at this point for doing responsive design. Large is in terms of their user base and their audience and how much they're actually implemented. Bootstrap obviously has, I would say, more people using it than Foundation. I can admit that with a straight face. But both of them are very large, very well-established open source projects. If you have never used a framework, I'm going to talk to you in a minute about all the reasons that you should. But there are lots of frameworks to choose from now. There's a great deal more than just Foundation and Bootstrap. Foundation was, I believe, the actual, by our current definitions of frameworks, was the first really responsive framework. Bootstrap was not originally responsive. They are both responsive and both mobile first at this point. There are a number of others. I was talking to Jen over there just before this, and she mentioned that anytime she talks about Foundation and Bootstrap, people always want to talk about Pure. If you guys have never heard of Pure, it's from Yahoo. You could go check it out. I think Pure is neat. I don't totally get its entire appeal because I feel like it's a little too non-functional. But it's very pretty, and it's very small, and it's very clean. And I think in at least some part, it's a reaction on Yahoo's part to just stop doing UI, which more power to them. But Pure is pretty neat, and as just sort of like a baseline starting point, you could do a lot worse. There's Gumby, which is now on 2.6 apparently. Gumby actually started off as a fork of Foundation, but they've now rewritten most of that, and they do their own thing. And they do some pretty cool stuff actually in Gumby. I would be fine stealing some of their things now and then, but they're pretty cool. There's Bourbon Neat. If you ever messed around with this, if you like semantic code, I will be the good Foundation spokesperson and say that anything you can do in Bourbon Neat, you can do in Foundation, but Bourbon definitely makes it more upfront. So Bourbon Neat has a very large, like very semantic following. If the idea of putting presentational classes in your markup makes you twitch up and spaz out a little bit, Bourbon Neat's got you covered. It was built by people who have that exact same reaction. There's like dozens more of these frameworks. There's like a new framework every other day, I think. They just keep popping up. And I think some of that's also a reaction to a lot of people, especially like, really kind of purist web designers look at frameworks and are like, oh, I don't want to use somebody else's code. I want to use my code. And it inevitably leads to them building their own framework and releasing that open source and encouraging other people to use their framework, which is just perpetuates the cycle. However you want to do this, however you want to investigate frameworks and use frameworks is fine with me. But what I would say unequivocally is that if you're going to be doing responsive design and you're going to be building things for the web, do use frameworks. That's not always a popular thing to say, but I believe it to be true. There are good reasons not to. They are far outweighed by all the good reasons that you should, including things like best practices. The really nice thing about using frameworks is that there are so many things you have to do. The bar is pretty low these days. Let's not kid ourselves. The bar is pretty low to build a website. Most people can make a website one way or other. I can go to Squarespace and I can fill out a form and I pretty much have a website. I can fire up, Dreamweaver's probably dead, but I can fire up, I don't know, I think there's RapidWeaver and a few others now, and I can drag some things around and it'll publish it to somewhere and I have a website. It's not that hard to make a website. It's still hard to make a really good website, and it's hard to make a good website that's done really well. A beautiful thing about using frameworks is that in order to make a website that is really well implemented, there are many, many things you have to know how to do. If you use a framework, that cuts down the number of things you have to worry about in that regard considerably. Because it's very egotistical for me to say, there are very smart people taking care of these problems for you, because that includes myself. But there are smart people figuring these things out for you, and you don't have to worry about them so much. It's nice to be able to start from something where you can be fairly confident that what you're starting from is actually done well and written well and is going to work. So including like best practices like that are great. Another great thing about frameworks, it really helps you go faster. It just helps you build faster. I was wondering if that was going to get any chuckles or not. Must go faster, must go faster. Come on, anybody? Jurassic Park? You know the movie is 20 years old now? Can you believe that? That is ridiculous. I saw it a few weeks ago in the theater. It actually holds up. I was shocked. But yeah, it makes me feel old. But frameworks really help you go faster. And I think this is important because there's an adage which is like, it doesn't matter who had the idea first, it's who actually got it done. right? Like you can have a great idea and that's great, but a great idea is just a great idea. If you can't get it done, then it doesn't matter. And if you have a great idea and someone else has the great idea and they're the one that gets it done, it didn't matter whether you had it first. It didn't matter whether yours was better. It didn't matter whether it was your idea in the first place. They win. I think it's important to be able to move quickly on the web. The web is a very fast-moving place. The web is sort of preposterously fast, in fact. So helping you go faster is, I think, pretty important, and frameworks really help you get there because you don't have to do so much of this groundwork kind of stuff. You don't need to reinvent the wheel with all these pieces. You have components, you have structures in place that will help you very quickly get something going. I think that also just, it really helps you focus on the things that you're going to bring to the table. So this is an area that can be a little bit like touchy because I think everybody thinks that everything they're going to bring to the table is going to be unique and everyone is a special snowflake and everybody has their own great way of doing da 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 da. At the end of the day, if you're going to build a website and you're going to build it using some sort of layout that's going to work on multiple devices, you are probably going to use some sort of a grid system, and whether you build your own or use someone else's, it's going to be there. I don't think that it's important for people necessarily to focus on things like that. I don't think it's important to focus on exactly the way you would code up a button. They're already there. I don't think that it's important to focus on exactly how you would code up a tab bar. It's already there. Focus on the things that you're really going to bring to the table, which is what you can build on top of that. Now, that might just mean that you're going to build on top of nothing but the grid. It might mean you're going to build on top of nothing but button and typography styles. That's fine. Just take the pieces where you don't really care about that being your differentiator and ignore that stuff. Let a framework take care of that for you. Do your thing. I've seen amazing stuff built on top of frameworks that has no bearing on the framework at all. The framework was just there to support doing something really interesting on top of it. And that's what gets me really excited. That's actually what gets me really excited about working on frameworks, is enabling people to do more awesome stuff. Just think of what a huge pain in the ass it would be if every time we wanted to write any software, we had to start from assembly. That would suck. Unless you're John Carmack, who gets off on that kind of thing. It's just not fun to do. And once upon a time, I had to write some assembly, and I don't want to do it again. And I don't really want to write C anymore, and I don't want to write Swing in Java. I don't want to do any of those things. And I don't want to write my own browser. I want to work from what is already there, and frameworks are another way to do that. Frameworks are also constantly updated. All of the frameworks that exist right now, right? I love that one. All of the frameworks that exist right now are very, very active. They're very frequently updated. Foundation, we're on version 5. We're actually on version 5.2. We'll be on 5.3 next week. Bootstrap is on version 3, and I know he's working on version 4. Gumby's on 2.6. Pure is on, I don't even know what, 1 point something something. All of these are updated very frequently, and especially the ones that are larger open source projects, because there's just a lot of people who want to contribute to these things. We pull in I think somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 pull requests for Foundation every week. It's just and that's just what other people are writing, not even what we're doing. So they are very, very frequently updated. There are so many good reasons to use frameworks. If you actually have a question, I'm perfectly happy to do questions in the middle of this. I don't really care. So, how do you take care of code bloat? Very carefully. Framework, that is actually a complaint that's leveled against frameworks a lot, is that they can be bloated. They have a lot of components that you may not need. When you go to update them, it may add something that you didn't necessarily need or want. The thing that I would say to that is just actually pretty much all the frameworks that exist right now that are really commonly used, I know Bootstrap and Foundation both do this, and I believe some of the others do, is that we try to make it very easy to omit anything you're not going to use. It's very easy to turn things off. All of the major frameworks, I believe, are built using preprocessors, which means you can actually just disable components anytime you want, and they will be cut from your actual generated code. We also try to write them in such a way that they're frankly just not that bloated. We try to be good about that. We don't always succeed, but we try. So I think as long as you just stay diligent about what it is you're pulling in, the tools are there to help you use a framework without using a really bloated framework. The other thing you can do is to actually build everything semantically. Bourbon Neat is the one that is the poster child for this, but you can do the same thing in Foundation, and I think you can mostly do it in Bootstrap too, which is you can write whatever markup you want and just attach styles to your own objects and not pull in any of our stuff or any of our generated stuff at all, which is another way to do it. So there's a few ways to get around code bloat. It's still a legitimate complaint. Generally, if you use a framework, your site will end up a little bit bigger than if you didn't, most every time. I think it's worth the trade-off. I'm a little biased, but that's my opinion. It's a good question, though. And seriously, if you have questions, I'm just up here talking. So.
Most of the frameworks now also include JavaScript. Do you do any sort of code audit to ensure security?
That is an excellent question. The short answer is no. The longer answer is we do try to be, I think, fairly careful about them. We don't do any like formal auditing. That's probably not the worst idea. I can speak for Foundation, and I'll kind of speak for Mark for Bootstrap, which is if there was going to be any formal auditing of the JavaScript from a security standpoint, we would love for someone to do that, and it's an open source project, so that would be fantastic. Because we have relatively small teams that work on this. I think the core team for Bootstrap is 6. The core team for Foundation is, I think, 6. So we have limited time in which we can do some of these things. I have 2 engineers that work on Foundation to do JavaScript stuff, but they have to do a lot of other things too. So if that is something that you're interested in, I would actually say security is one thing, and actually accessibility. I was speaking at an accessibility conference just a couple of months ago, a month ago, which was very eye-opening for me because I know nothing about accessibility, and I wasn't sure why they wanted me to speak, but they were very excited about it. But I learned quite a bit about the depth of accessibility stuff within frameworks, and that is definitely an area where frameworks fall short right now, but that's also an area where we desperately need other people's help because we don't know enough about it. Yes?
I just wanted to mention an app called CodeKit 2 that I use.
Awesome app.
If you guys know about it.
It's called,
CodeKit 2?
yeah, it's called CodeKit, or CodeKit 2 is the version that it's on now.
It has a preprocessor for SAS. Comes with ZURB.
It does.
And uses like Bower and Grunt, so automatically updates. So I don't know if you guys know about CodeKit, but you should.
If you do want to get started with a framework, that is an excellent point. If you want to get started with a framework very quickly, CodeKit 2 is a great way to do it. There's also an app called Mixture.io, which does something similar. Basically just spins up a project for you, grabs the framework, installs it, compiles it, minifies things for you, runs a server. Like, they do it all, and it's pretty cool. So definitely play around with those, yes.
There was a speech before this one that handled un-CSS that'll take out your unused CSS.
That thing is cool too.
So you can apply all the stuff into one style sheet and then just knock out everything you don't need.
This is cool. I'm just going to pull you up here to you can just do this for the rest of my talk, actually. This is fantastic. This is a bunch of stuff that I would love to be mentioning. I'll just take credit for it. You should totally check out CodeKit. You should totally check out un-CSS. Don't listen to him. It's all from me. Just kidding. No, that's awesome. There are a ton of good reasons to use frameworks, and there's a huge ecosystem built up around frameworks at this point, like things like that really make it very, very powerful. Yes?
Okay. Promise, last question.
Okay.
Frameworks in general are not easy to learn. How do you handle documentation, and how do you handle kind of onboarding someone who's new to frameworks or new to your framework?
I send you to the Foundation workshop that's tomorrow here at HTML5DevConf with the lovely Jen Kramer right up here in the front. Oh, okay, you can't go to that. All right. She just planted you, didn't she? So for all the major frameworks, we actually do try to write very thorough documentation. We don't always succeed, but we do have pretty thorough documentation. I know Foundation, we try to have very thorough documentation, and I know Bootstrap has very thorough documentation. If that's not entirely doing it for you, there are any number of tutorials and other sorts of sites out there that will help you get started with this stuff. There's a lot of video tutorials out there about getting started with Bootstrap or Foundation or any number of other frameworks. I believe there will be one on Lynda pretty soon. Yeah, soon. I'm looking at real soon. Going to be one on Lynda. So you can check that out as well. I swear she didn't pay me either. I'm just here and she's there. So yeah. There are a lot of resources out there for it, and I mean, at the end of the day, I frankly try to be pretty accessible about some of the stuff, and I know Mark from Bootstrap does as well. In fact, I'm happy to give you Mark's home phone number if you want to get started with Bootstrap. Not mine. He might give you mine in exchange. I mean, no kidding. If you have questions about Foundation, especially, I'm Jonathan at ZURB.com. You can email me whenever you'd like. So that goes for any of you. Might take me a little while to reply, but I'll get there. It's a pretty open community, and there's a lot of people doing it. So it's definitely something you can get into if you're interested. We try to make it pretty easy. ZURB also does training on this as well. If you'd like to pay ZURB, we will train you. So ta-da! Lots of things that you can do. Yes?
I'm really curious about your workflow because you mentioned sketching and then prototypes and then comps. And I thought it was sort of weird because I thought the job of the prototype was to kind of let you navigate through what would be a comp. So I would think that you would do the comps first.
We'll do it both ways. We'll do prototypes that are based on sketches.
Yeah, what the reason for each one was.
We do prototypes from sketches, so we know where there's holes that we need to fill with wireframes. We do prototypes with wireframes, so we know where there's holes to fill with more wireframes. And we do prototypes with mock-ups, so we can understand whether the actual visual design works when you're trying to use it or not. So I'll actually do prototypes at any step of the way. If we were only going to do it in one place, I'd do it after we do the wireframes and before we do the visuals. But that's if we were only going to do it once. Typically, we'll do it more than once. It's a good question. Okay, I have like a few more slides, and then I swear I will answer any questions you guys have, but I think I'm actually going to run out of time, and I didn't expect this to go nearly as long as it has. So I'm going to move very quickly through the rest of this stuff because this is pretty fun, and I just like talking to you guys, and I don't really like droning on and on. So the real responsive, what we have and what we need. So to get responsive design really, really done well, there's a few things that we actually have to tackle, the biggest of which is optimization. Optimization is not something that responsive design entirely has down yet, I'll be totally honest. The nice thing about having one code to rule them all is that you have one code. The bad thing about having one code to rule them all is that it doesn't always work everywhere. The biggest example of this is when you look at things like assets or media. The thing that I would liken this to is that in a lot of cases you want to have like big, sweeping, powerful media, great big things, and then they get sucked down into tiny little devices. And that doesn't always work super well. Handling assets and handling media and handling what you deliver to what device and where is very challenging. That goes for really any kind of content. Have any of you ever tried to use an embedded Google map on a web page? On a mobile device? Sucks. Really sucks. It is the worst. I saw a website once where the Google map that was embedded on it was literally larger than my phone screen, which meant that once I had scrolled down to it, I could no longer go anywhere else. I could not scroll out of the map. I was just trapped forever in a map. It was hilarious. It was like a game of, can I fling this fast enough that I can get past the map? Because if I can't, I'm just doomed. So it sucks. However, happy news, there are tools out there to help you do this. One that we have built into Foundation is called Interchange. Interchange is a plugin that's built into Foundation which dynamically loads the correct content for the correct device through JavaScript. The way it works, you can use it with images. The first example you'll see within the docs is that we load the right image for the right device, which is pretty handy. What's even cooler about it, though, is that you can actually load things like, and I hate to show code because I know how hard that is to read and blah, 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 but basically this is, within a given space, I can load different HTML partials based on the size of the screen or based on other physical characteristics of the device, which makes doing something like when you show maps, what we've actually started doing is on mobile devices, we pull in static maps, like just an image, because it's a very fast request. You don't have to worry about scrolling it and swiping it and getting stuck in it, and we will actually load in an actual embedded Google map on larger devices that support more of the functionality you would need for that. So there's really cool ways to actually handle that now. As it comes to just images, this I thought was really neat. This was about a month ago, 2 months ago now, I guess, that Chrome actually added the source set element to to straight up just Chrome. If you've never used source set is really neat. It lets you drop in basically a set of different elements, a set of different sources, and the browser will load the right one, which is pretty rad. Because it does it like immediately. They are also going to be implementing the picture element, which does almost the exact same thing, and I'm not entirely sure why they're doing both. I really thought we were going to pick one or the other, but apparently we're just going to pick both. But it's cool that this is actually becoming a thing that's really in browsers. Now, granted, it's just in Chrome, and Chrome is like the pimped out hot rod of browsers. You can do anything in Chrome. So you won't get this in the IE till probably, I don't know, 13 or 14 or God only knows. But it will happen and it will be there. I'm kidding. It'll probably actually be in like 11 or something. Microsoft appears to be less dumb these days. In the meantime, you can use a really cool polyfill called PictureFill, which is from Scott Gell at Filament Group. Maybe it's just from Filament Group now. Maybe Scott doesn't put his name entirely on it. But PictureFill is really cool. It's a polyfill that essentially lets you use the picture element already, and it just makes it work everywhere that it doesn't work. So that's pretty hot. SVGs and fonts and rasters. Has anybody actually used SVGs on a web page? Wow, that's a lot more hands than I was expecting. How about like fonts, icon fonts, to do stuff like that? Math, always better than pixels. If you can actually do something that can scale to any size, like an SVG does, or like an icon font does, that's pretty hot. That's one asset that will work everywhere at any size, no matter what. It is the best. SVGs are, there's actually some really cool tools for doing SVGs. SVG icons or SVGs assets are amazing because they scale to any size. Do you actually know that you can put media queries inside an SVG? It's like magic. It's actually really cool. There is an icon set that you should check out, if only because it's an amazing case study in using SVGs called Iconic. It was actually crowdfunded. I think it was a Kickstarter. There's an open source version of it. There's a paid version that does all kinds of crazy stuff, but there's an open source version of it that you can play around with, which includes an SVG version, a web font version, includes raster versions, and you can see the pros and cons of all of them, and it's amazing. You should totally check it out. SVGs are really rad. They're just a little trickier to use and author. So that can be delicate. Icon fonts are really easy. The problem with those is that they can become surprisingly huge. If you have icon fonts that have like 200, 300, 400 icons or something in them, they're very large files, and you don't tend to end up using most of them. This is really cool. You can do SVG sprites. I think this is hot. SVG sprites are really rad. Because what you can, has anybody done like image sprites before? Like sprites for a website? Yeah, most people. Sprites are cool because it's just one request, right? Which is awesome. That's fast. SVG sprites are even cooler because it's one request and you can specify which part of the sprite you want to use. You don't even have to use like really horrible positioning stuff to get it in the right place. You can actually reference it other ways. And there are tools like IcoMoon that will actually generate an SVG sprite for you of the icons you choose and tell you how to use them. Like, the tools are amazing. You can just do like all of this incredible stuff, and it is so much easier than it used to be. There's a really great article on CSS Tricks about doing entire icon systems using SVG sprites. So definitely check that out. Very, very hot. Yes?
I just had a quick question about SVG sprites, which is where I work. We did a tiny SVG images instead, because we wanted, for icons, the images themselves will scale between mobile and desktop.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my short question is, with the SVG sprite, can you affect the size?
You can, yes. They don't work quite like sprites the way sprites used to work, where it's like if you do a larger space, then you would see more of the sprite. You're actually specifying a particular zone within the SVG to use, and you can scale that to any size. Yeah, it's hot. Yeah, it's good stuff. Okay, last thing I want to talk about, the future, the things that are coming up. Next big thing, Foundation for Apps. This is actually kind of entertaining because this is the first time I've actually publicly talked about what we're doing with Foundation in the future. So, ta-da! You don't have to clap. What we're doing actually with Foundation is we've decided as a company and as the people who do Foundation that web apps are the shit. And that's what we're going to pursue. So Foundation as it exists today will be henceforth known as Foundation for Sites, and Foundation for Apps will be the next major version of Foundation. And we're going to do a bunch of neat stuff in there that I'm sure other frameworks are going to copy. Like using better and more awesome layout tools, like something that's not just float. We're actually building the whole thing with Flexbox, which is going to be pretty cool. Flexbox, if you haven't messed around with Flexbox, Flexbox is 90% awesome and 10% infuriating, but the 90% is really, really awesome. So it's totally worth it. So we're going to have Flexbox built in there for everything except IE9 and down, because it doesn't support Flexbox, and that's just the way it goes. Motion UI, this is something that we're actually going to be building into Foundation for Apps as well. I keep wanting to call it Foundation 6 because that's what we call it internally, but that's not the real name. Motion UI is because we've recognized that in order to really build stuff for the web anymore, you need to be able to move things. The web is not static anymore. Perfect example, things like off-canvas navigation that you'll see right there on Squarespace's site. You don't click on that and it reloads a page that has the menu over on the right-hand side. It slides in, it moves things around, stuff transitions, there's things that fade out, there's things that fade in. There's all kinds of crafty stuff that happens with motion and animation and transition, and we want to make that as easy as possible. So there's a large component of motion UI that we're going to be building into Foundation for Apps, and I imagine we'll see in a lot of frameworks before too much longer. And the last major thing we're going to build into it is actual web app prototyping. Static pages are dead. the page is dead. When I open up Gmail, I don't load my Gmail page and click on something and wait for it to refresh the page to show me my message, and then click on another thing and open a new message as a new page. It's all just an app. It's all stateful single-page stuff. To that end, we are going to be building a lot of Foundation for Apps on top of Angular. If that makes you excited, then that's cool. If that makes you full of fear, then I would be curious to hear why. But I think that's going to be pretty hot. And will enable us to do things like this, where you can actually, what we want to be able to do is to let designers and people who don't write a whole lot of JavaScript to actually prototype an app the way it's supposed to work without having to write a whole bunch of JavaScript. So being able to write things into your markup, for example, like this, where you actually want to switch from one partial to another in a particular location using a particular transition, and do all of that in just markup. I think that would be awesome. I'm very excited about being able to do that, because we think designers and everyone else should be able to prototype the right way. Whew, okay. Sketch things, wireframe them, prototype them, mock them up, write code, do it the right way, for reals, if you will. YOLO swag. Thank you. I'm Smiley on Twitter. You can follow ZURB as well. Thank you very much. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes. I'll hang, but I know some of you guys gotta run. So.